ready, go. Hey everybody, welcome to Misfits and Moguls, the naked truths of the self-employed. I am your host, Melissa Geisinger, and I am coming to you live from Santa Rosa, California, and my beautiful bedroom with my audience here, my dog, my dog Barnaby, and my cat Bo. They accompany me during every recording. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about our show. Misfits and Moguls is a live streamed video podcast that hands the mic to your everyday entrepreneurs, from struggling freelancers to successful millionaires. And it allows them to tell their stories unfiltered. We record live, which means two things. Number one, anything can happen, including me stumbling over my words, which that's a guarantee. And number two is you can be a part of the show. So I hope that you will participate, submit your questions and comments throughout, especially at the end when I am done asking my prepared list of questions. All the show details, past and future, are going to be available on the website, misfitsandmoguls.com. Today's episode, I have with me Brian Fees. Brian is a friend of mine. He's been a journalist, a chemist, a science writer, a freelance writer, and an award-winning graphic novelist. His first book was the graphic memoir, Mom's Cancer, followed by Whatever Happened to the World of Tomorrow, and A Fire Story, which tells the story of his home burning down in the Northern California firestorm of 2017. On a personal note, that is the same fire that took my own house, and so that is how Brian and I met. A little bit more on that later. Today's show is brought to you by myself. I am a mortgage advisor, and I would love for you to keep me in mind for your home finance needs. As I said, in 2017, I lost my home in a wildfire, and shortly after, my son was born with special medical needs. And I realized, going through all of those changes, just how much the idea of home meant to me. And so I had decided to align my professional and career goals in line with that. So to learn more about that, you can go to gohomewithmelissa.com. All right, without further ado, please welcome our guest, Brian Fees.
Click. Hi, Melissa.
Hey, Brian.
How are you?
I am so good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here today. This is going to be fun. I hope it's fun. I hope it's not just horrible.
I told you anything's possible. It's
I should say,
I reserve the right to not be fun.
Well, we need to establish at the outset, I am not one of your successful millionaires. That's some other episode.
Yeah, that'll come much, much later. All right. So, hey, first things first, we got to get an order of business out of the way. Okay. So, because on Misfits and Moguls, we believe in full-blown honesty and transparency, I have developed a tradition. This is the second time it's happening, but I'm already deeming it a tradition. We are going to pick a safe word. Okay.
Okay.
This safe word is going to be used in case anyone, myself included, asks you a question that is just too darn personal or embarrassing, and you opt out. Okay.
Well, doesn't it, isn't it against the whole purpose of a safe word, though, is everybody hears us establish the safe word, and then, half an hour from now, we're saying umbrella, umbrella, umbrella. And everybody's like, I know what you're doing. I don't know. Okay. Right. Safe word.
Bear with me here. What do you pick?
Well, I'll pretend we didn't discuss this beforehand, but you know what? What do you want?
Do you forget? You forget
Yeah,
what we
I
picked
kind of
before?
forgot.
It was fire truck, fire truck.
Fire truck, right. Well, my wife and I, we have a safe word when we go out to parties or whatever. And it's when it's time to leave, the safe word is it's time to leave. Or sometimes it's umbrella. Umbrella is our safe word, and fire truck is sometimes our safe word. So I've used them all. I've used fire truck or umbrella or it's time to leave.
I have a feeling we're gonna have similar
Fire truck. Perfect.
Okay,
That's a
so
fire truck. Fire
for the
truck.
audience joining us, feel free to call it out, okay? When when Brian's too wimpy.
And then a duck falls from the sky, and yeah, okay.
Hey, we've got a comment here.
Oh, already?
Ben says, howdy from Phoenix.
Oh, hey, Ben.
Oh, this
Ben.
is going to be fun.
Yeah. Howdy, Ben.
We have fans. This is awesome. All right.
That's cool.
All right. So the title of today's episode, Turning Tragedy into Stories That Sell.
Oh, man, you hit pretty close to the bone. Fire truck. Fire truck. No, it's okay. Yeah. It's okay.
If you're already uncomfortable talking about things, we're not in a good place.
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, so now today you're an award-winning graphic novelist, but I want to know, where did you start? Because not many people start out being self-employed.
No, it's really hard. And I hope when you asked me to do this, I said I would be just totally honest. And part of the honesty is about how hard it is to be self-employed, how hard it is to get there, how hard it is to maintain it. But I started out, I grew up, spent quite a bit of time in Santa Rosa. My actual childhood was in South Dakota, but we moved to the Bay Area when I was 10 or 11. So I went to high school in Santa Rosa, went to UC Davis where I met my wife. My first job out of college, I majored in physics, but my first job out of college was I took a job as a part-time night shift sports writer for a little tiny newspaper in Central California. And I think the only reason I got that job is I was the fastest typist who applied. There's no other explanation. I mean, I'd written some things for my college newspaper, but so lesson one in how to become a freelancer is you're going to take those jobs that nobody else wants. And one of them for me, the one that made a difference in my life, was part-time night shift sports writer. And the thing that made me a professional writer, I think, and I say this half facetiously and half seriously, was I had to cover a season of high school girls basketball. And I don't know a lot of basketball. I don't like basketball, but I had to go and every day write a story about what had happened in the previous night's basketball game. And it made me a writer. It made me a professional writer because I had to learn the game, understand the game, know enough about the game and the players and the people and the teams to be able to say intelligently, here's why last night's game was different from the other 57 games I told you about. And, that's nothing quite motivates the brain like having to put food on the table.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, I moved up in that position, same newspaper I did. I went to full-time city beat and education beat, did some other things. And it was a small paper. So I learned a lot about graphics, how to prepare graphics for print and publication, which I still use some of that information today. Even though it's all digital today, it's still sort of the same processes in theory. So I loved writing. I did writing. I got paid to write. I was a newspaper reporter for like two and a half, maybe 3 years. And then my wife, my new wife, got a job opportunity. So we moved, and I couldn't get a newspaper job where I was, but I had this physics degree. So I went to work as a chemist, an environmental chemist, because they saw a physics degree and said, oh, he knows chemistry. I didn't know any chemistry. I didn't know any chemistry at all. I read my,
As someone who also has a physics degree. Yeah. I barely qualify for anything physics related as it is, but
yeah. Well, my wife had taken physics in college, so I read her textbook over the weekend, and I reported to work on Monday, ready to be a chemist, and I fooled them. I fooled them successfully for about 12, 13 years. I was an environmental chemist and got to be a supervisor and developed some cool new methods and stuff. But, sort of my whole life and career, the story of my life and career is I love writing. I love art. I love science. And whenever I'm doing one of those things, I miss the others. And so it's just, I'm kind of like this three-legged stool. It's always crooked, you know, no matter what I'm doing, I wish I was doing the other things. And meanwhile, my whole life, all this whole time, I'm making cartoons. I want to be a cartoonist. I want to draw superheroes for DC and Marvel. And I want to, my comic strip of the newspapers. And I tried to do all those things when I was in my teens and 20s. And I failed. I failed at all of them. Like a lot of people in creative fields, I just, you know, didn't find a way to make a living at it. So I went on to do other things. And again, something I sort of intend to touch on as we talk is one thing I've learned to be true is you can carve your own path. You can become a freelancer by taking on the things nobody else wants to do. And you have to sort of cast 100 seeds out into the world, and 2 or 3 of them are going to blossom, but you never know which ones, you know? I mean, my favorite example is I wrote a story when I was a newspaper reporter about a project called the Helms Pump Storage Project. It was a way of storing energy between 2 dams, a high dam and a low dam in the Sierra Nevada. And when they needed electricity, they'd release water from the top dam to the bottom dam. And then when they had enough electricity, they'd pump the water back up. So it was a battery. It was a battery the size of 2 lakes in the middle of Sierra Nevada. And my newspaper editor said, "Hey, anybody want to go to Fresno for the weekend?" I said, "Yeah, what the heck, I'll do it." Nobody else wanted to do it. I said, I'll go check that out. So I write this story about the Helms Pump Storage Project. And then 10 years later, I'm applying to be a science writer at this sort of boutique firm that's got, you know, 8 employees on it. And that's what they do. They write about science. It's the only thing I had. I take this clip in and I say, I wrote this. And the guy reads it and he says, "Well, I see that you can take a complex technical subject and write it in a way that anybody can understand it. Well done. You got the job."
Wow.
So it gave me a whole nother career as a science writer. This one thing I did as a lark on a weekend 10 years earlier, you know, ushered me into this whole other thing. And that's happened time and time and time again in my career and all my careers, is that little thing you did 2, 3, 10 years ago that, you know, you did on a lark, you did just for the heck of it. You did for free. You did for no good reason at all. That's the thing that pays off way down the road. And you never know which one, but you got to do a lot of those. You got to kind of keep it churning, keep working, and keep looking for those opportunities. So I think that's real important. I think that's a life lesson that you know, I've learned in my dotage.
Yeah. Learning to say yes to any strange opportunity that comes your way.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, just to complete my story, I did the science writing for quite a while. This whole time I'm doing freelance writing. I'm writing articles for magazines and stuff and selling them and placing them as I can. And I had some success with that, not enough to live on, but I got some clips and I got some, you know, a little bit of reputation. And then I had an opportunity while all that was going on. I still wanted to be a cartoonist. I was still practicing cartooning. I was doing freelance illustration. I illustrated a light bulb catalog once. And again, it's one of those jobs. Who wants to illustrate a light bulb catalog? But you never know, you know? And it was kind of fun because light bulbs come in a lot of shapes and sizes you'd never suspect. And so I sort of found myself becoming a cartoonist in my 40s when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And I wanted to tell our family story, and I didn't know how. And I thought, well, let me back up on that. I wanted to tell our family story because we kept being surprised by things that happened to us during the course of my mother's illness. And I wanted to draw a map for people coming along behind us. I wanted to write the book I wish someone had written for me. And I think that's probably the best motivation to do anything, is write a book that you wish someone had written for you. And so I wanted to tell our family story, but I didn't know how to do it. I had experience writing magazine articles and writing newspaper pieces. I thought, well, maybe I'll do that. And I took my mom to chemotherapy one day and just did a quick sketch of her sitting in the chair getting chemotherapy. And I realized that's how I'm going to tell my family story. I'm going to tell my family story as a cartoon, as comics. And so I started the project that eventually became the web comic, and then the book Mom's Cancer.
See it? No.
And
I need to pick up a copy. I still don't have one. It's so beautiful, though.
Oh, thanks so much. Thank you. It started as a web comic because I just wanted to get the story out. I didn't know what else to do with it. The web is free and easy, so I put it online. and it went viral, and it led to print, and it really gave me this whole kind of second career that has over time become my full-time career of being a graphic novelist / cartoonist, again, self-employed. So I've been off and on self-employed, working entirely on my own out of a spare bedroom in the house for about 21 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you published the webcomic, was that just on your own website, on your blog, or where did you put it?
Yeah, I bought a domain name for like $12. It was momscancer.com. It's still there, but it doesn't have the comic on it anymore. But I just bought a domain name and started putting it up there, and told 2 or 3 friends, hey, go, I'm working on this thing. Go tell me what you think about it. And they told 2 friends, and within a few months it had just blown up, gone completely viral, and kind of set me on this whole different path of life that, but I don't have any advice about, well, how do you promote yourself? I didn't. I just put it out there, and people found it.
Yeah, you don't exactly set the best example there of online promotion and marketing, right?
Oh, I'm the worst example of everything. I mean, I should have started our whole conversation by just saying, don't even try to do what I did, because it won't work for anybody else but me. I mean, it's just this series of fumbles and luck. But I say that half jokingly because the secret of luck is preparation, right? You're lucky if you're prepared, right? And so if you're looking for those opportunities, and if you've sown those 100 flower seeds and 2 or 3 of them come up, that's not luck. That's you sowing those seeds. You did the work, you laid the groundwork, and something blossoms later.
So, how did your mom how did she react to you making this book out of her struggle?
I posted anonymously at first, partly because I was a coward, partly because I didn't want to add anything to the stress my family's already going through. I didn't want them thinking, oh, geez, there's Brian, taking notes in the corner.
These were secret comics.
Yeah, they were secret comics for a while, and then again, much to my surprise, it kind of went viral and got popular and got a lot of readers. And one day I got an email from a guy who said, hey, I think I know your sisters. And I said, oh, crap.
Like, I should probably tell them.
Yeah. So I called them all individually, my mom and my sisters and my stepdad. And I said, I've been working on this thing. Go take a look. Tell me what you think. And luckily, my mom loved it. My mom's always had this sort of dramatic streak to her that life's a pageant and she's the queen of it. And she also, I think, saw it as a way to take this really horrible thing that was happening to her and get something good out of it.
Right.
Make something good. If my mom had hated it, I would have killed the whole thing immediately. But my mom called me back up and she said, ooh, I can't wait to find out what happens next. So I just thought that was wonderful. So mom was on board. And if mom hadn't been on board, it never would have happened. My sister took a little more, we're not quite so sanguine. They said, that's not quite the way I remember everything happening, but I respect that you got to tell your story your way. And they sort of gave me their blessing as well.
Yeah.
One of my sisters is a screenwriter, and she said, "Ooh, I'm writing a movie about it." And I said, "Well, there you go. We understand each other." So it's
always a risk, though, when you write about real life.
Yeah.
Well,
a lot of people.
Did I remember this correctly or not? Will I offend anyone?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of deep thinking that goes into that if you want to, writing about yourself and people around you. And there is an element of betrayal about it. There's some, I think it could be done ethically, but I think it's a fine line. The graphic novelist Alison Bechdel has written about that too, about how she more or less, betrayed particularly her mother, but also she outed her father, whom she was pretty sure was gay, but he never actually said so in her very popular and best-selling books. And, that's tough. I mean, there's a conflict there between wanting and needing to tell the truth, which I think is the first responsibility of any storyteller, and actually hurting people you love. And I walked that as best I could. I actually I didn't give anybody except my mom veto power. If my mom had said, I don't want you to do that, I wouldn't have done it. So I was going to tell the truth about everybody else and everything else. But if I'd really hurt feelings, I probably might have tried to ameliorate that a little bit, try to meet up somebody halfway. It didn't actually come up. There was only one relationship. I wrote about my dad in the book, and I was just prepared to lose my relationship with him over it. If he had wanted to say, we're done, I don't want to talk to you anymore, I would have lived with that.
Wow.
Thankfully, it didn't come to that. I showed it to him, and he said, well, you don't make me look very good. And I said, well, that's the way I remember it. And he said, well, sort of the same thing my sisters did. I respect that you need to tell your story your way. And he sort of gave me his blessing, which really went a long way toward repairing our relationship ever since. It was really, really an unexpectedly stand-up thing of him to do. I really appreciated it.
Gosh, that's incredible. So where did you go after that then? So you had, is that where you got your original relationship with your publisher?
Yeah.
What is that relationship like?
Well, again, this is the part of the story where what worked for me will not work for you or anybody else.
Yeah.
But when Mom's Cancer was done online, when the story was finished, I literally just photocopied off like 5 copies of it, put it in the same kind of report folder you'd submit a report in for high school English or something, and I mailed it off to 5 publishers. That shouldn't work, although usually you need an agent to submit a book to any publisher. Like if you write a novel, you'll need an agent. You're going to need an agent. Even if you write a children's book, you're going to need an agent. The graphic novel business was and is still a little bit Wild West. It sort of came more out of the loosey-goosey days of comic books, where it was just relationships and publications and deals and stuff could be made very informally. If you knew a guy and you could tell him a good story, he'd say, yeah, we'll publish that. And so it sort of came out of more of that tradition. So I was lucky enough that my packet of Mom's Cancer landed on the desk of a guy named Charlie Kochman at Abrams Books at almost exactly the time he'd been hired by Abrams Book to develop a graphic novel line. I mean, it just couldn't have been more perfect. He was new on the job. He basically sits down at his desk, picks up the first envelope, and it's mine, and he said, this is what I'm going to do. So I was his first acquisition for Abrams. Charlie is a fantastic guy. He's got a long relationship, a lot of experience in the business. He did the Choose Your Own Adventure books. He worked for DC and Mad Magazine for a long time. So he's got just a ton of experience. He tells the best stories about, just all the people he's known in his career. And he and I have had a great relationship ever since. He edited Mom's Cancer, which was a real easy edit for him. Charlie's in my joke because it was done. And he just basically said, yeah, that'll do. So my joke is that Charlie's entire edit of the book was the last page of the book that doesn't have any words on it. He said, what you ought to do is just put one page at the end of the book that's just silent. And I said, that sounds like a great idea, Charlie. So that Charlie's contribution, his great editorial contribution, is a page that's got nothing on it. But Mom's Cancer did well. It got some awards and some recognition and some, it wasn't a bestseller, but, in the graphic novel world, it did okay. And so I pitched him another book, and that was Whatever Happened to the World of Tomorrow, which is sort of a space age history of me growing up, being a space age kid and wanting to know why I'm not living on the moon like I was promised when I was a kid. Where's my flying car? It's sort of that book about how America went from scientific utopianism to sort of this pessimistic dystopianism. We kind of went from Flash Gordon to Blade Runner. How did we go from thinking the future was going to be great to everybody thinks the future is going to stink? What's that arc like? So that's kind of what that book's about, in big picture wise. So we did that book together, and that went great. And I know you and I are going to talk about a fire story and our house is burning down, but the day after my house burned down, I started making a comic about it. I went to Target and I bought shoes and I bought pants and I bought a shirt and I bought art supplies.
Yeah.
And I started drawing and I put it online. I started putting it online within a couple of days. And because I had the model of mom's cancer in mind. First of all, the idea of just putting online as an easy, cheap way to get it out in the world, very important. But also as a model of you can use the comics medium to tell these very serious stories. I had already told, a story about my family going through cancer as a comic. It was no stretch of imagination to me to tell a story about my house burning down as a comic. And again, I had the experience of that going viral very quickly. Within a week, something like 700,000 people read a fire story online. Just
Yeah,
my
I
first
think I
18 pages of it.
remember. I think I remember it was the Press Democrat, right?
Yeah,
Shared
our
it.
local newspaper published it too. The big, huge, which astonished me, but like big full page comics.
That's where I
Oh,
first saw it.
yeah, uh, and I appreciate that. And they actually got a Pulitzer Prize for their coverage of the fires. And I like to think
Yeah.
I had a little. I own a little piece of that Pulitzer Prize. Although nobody at the Press Democrat ever told me that, but I think a little piece of that is mine. But so you know, and as you know, this comic was not the most important thing on my mind at that time. My house had just burned down, so to me, it was just this.
It was an
It,
outlet.
yeah, it was an outlet. It felt like something I could do. I had no control over the situation, none at all. There's nothing I could do to make it better, but it gave me this little piece of control, this little corner of the experience that was all mine. And in this world, I was in charge of this piece of the world. It felt constructive when there's just really nothing constructive I could do.
Yeah, I think that it's an incredible thing because, looking back now, we can really identify, when you're going through a massive traumatic experience, like, losing everything and almost dying.
Yeah.
Everyone deals with it in their own way, and it takes a special kind of person to identify that the world is spinning out of your control, and any little thing that you can do to get the littlest hold on your world and your life and channel it into something that's creative or productive or anything therapeutic it makes a world of a difference.
That's a really nice way to put it. And I think it also, I was sort of motivated by some of the same things that motivated my mom, which was take this really terrible thing and make something good out of this. And I also, it really drawed on a lot of my background because I really felt like a journalist. I felt like a newspaper reporter on the front lines. I realized as I was walking in my neighborhood of 200 flattened houses, which is smaller than your neighborhood of 1,500 flattened houses.
Yeah.
Your listeners may not know that we lost our houses in the same fire, but our houses are like 3 or 4 or 5 miles apart from each other. I mean, our fire was just that big.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew as I was walking in that I was in the middle of something historic, and I felt like a newspaper reporter. Like, I've got to tell people what this is like. I've got to report on this to the world. I've got to get it out. So I felt very motivated to do that. And I've always, and this goes back to mom's cancer, even before, I've always felt like no matter what I'm doing in life, I've got this second pair of eyeballs over my shoulder watching me watch life, watching me go through life. I've always got this sort of remove of observing myself. And so I felt very much, almost literally felt that as I was walking down these bombed streets toward where I knew my house should be and couldn't believe it wasn't there anymore. I felt like I'm living in it. I'm shocked. I'm just horrified by what I'm seeing. But I've also got this pair of eyes over my shoulder saying, pay attention to this because you're going to be writing about it later.
Yeah.
And so I took pictures on my way in just to document what I was seeing because I knew I'd be drawing those pictures later. Even before I knew my house was gone, I was making plans for how I was going to tell the story of my house going away. And I think that's probably not mentally healthy. I think I'm a deeply flawed human being.
I don't know about that. I think, well, sorry, it's for myself, I kind of think like I've got two, like there's kind of like, you have a voice on your shoulder. I've got two voices. All right. One on one side is saying you're being awfully selfish and self-centered by focusing on your experience and your story. And then the other side is like, people are expecting this and they relate to it, and it's helping other people who are going through the similar experience to kind of find a way to process and to work through it themselves. Because when it really comes down to it, I mean, it's not, there were thousands of people going through a similar experience. And the reason I think that your comic went viral so quickly, so easily, is because it was everyone's story.
Yeah.
You told the story, you shared the images, the colors even. I mean, it's just everything about this book just hit home to myself, to so many people. And so I know that when I saw that you were releasing the book and had the release party, which is where I met you, that I had to be there. It's like I have to be there because your story is my story. My story is your story. And it's just it's an incredible retelling of it that is so identifiable for so many people. And I'm so glad that you decided to listen to that voice on your shoulder.
Thank you for coming to the release party. Oh, this is the book, by the way.
Yeah, I've got
Fire story.
Yeah, let's see.
But yeah. Oh, there I am.
There you are.
They always advise writers or creative people to write what you know. I think that's very true, because you need to write what you know, because you have to bring things to it that an outsider would not get. You have to bring those details to it. I always add the caveat: write what you know, just as long as what you know is interesting. Because a lot of people write a memoir, or they'll write a story about themselves or their lives, and it's just not interesting. It's not different. It doesn't have anything to say about anything. Just because it happened to you does not perforce make it interesting. But half a town burning down, that's interesting. I knew that was interesting. That was different. I thought I had something to say about my family going through cancer that I hadn't seen anybody else say. So I thought that was interesting and worth telling. So I think another thing I've learned, I shall pontificate further. Another thing I've learned that I'm pretty sure is true is the best creative work comes from doing the work, telling the stories that nobody else but you can tell. And what's going to happen when you do that is, if you tell the truth, be as honest as you can, you're going to run into a lot of other people who say, I thought I was the only person who felt that way. If you can capture that, if you can capture something that somebody reads and says, oh my God, it's like he was sitting in my living room, which I had the experience of with both mom's cancer and a fire story, then I think, you've done your job. You've created a successful work of art of some sort. Whether anybody buys it or not is irrelevant at that point. You've got, you should go to bed satisfied if you've accomplished that. So that's important, I think.
Yeah. What is the first question you ask yourself when you're thinking of a new project?
Like a new graphic novel project?
Yeah.
I think it's just exactly what I just said. Is am I the only person, or am I the right person to tell the story? Is the first question I ask myself. Before the fire, I was working on in fact, I had done a lot of work, probably a couple of years of work on a graphic novel project that was sort of a blend of my interest in science and space and astronomy and physics. And it was trying to present some information in a graphically interesting way. And
using your degree for once.
Yeah. Well, I love science. And I wish people, I am not a scientist. I don't claim to be a scientist, but science informs the way I process the universe. It's how I see things. It's very important to me. It's very core to my personality. And I wish I was trying to communicate that idea to people, that even if you're not a scientist, science can offer you a way to look at the world and the universe in your life. So I was trying to do that before the fire, and the fire destroyed all my research and basically, wiped out that project. And I decided after the fire, I didn't need to do it anymore, because although it was very interesting to me, I was probably not the best person to tell that story, to do that work justice. Other people have done similar work. And I just felt like And I was feeling some frustration even before the fire that just wasn't, I wasn't accomplishing what I wanted to with it because it wasn't the right fit. It just wasn't, it's very important to me, but it wasn't right for me, you know? So it's hard to discern that sometimes because especially once you get into a thing and you've got sort of the sunk cost fallacy of, geez, I've been working on it for 2 years. I can't give up now. But
Yeah,
sometimes
that
you
is
have to.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to. And I got another story about that actually. I did a web comic called The Last Mechanical Monster. Right after I started right after whatever happened in the World of Tomorrow. And it was just intended to be kind of a fun story. My first work of just straight up fiction about an old man and his giant robot. That's all it was. Just a reminder to myself and my readers that comics can and should be fun. And I started doing the story, and I wrote and drew 100 pages of it, which takes a long time, months and months and months of work. I wrote and drew 100 pages of this story, and I looked at it and I realized that this wasn't really the story I wanted to tell. If I told somebody else the story, if I described to them, I'm working on this project called Last Mechanical Monster, and here's what it's about, and then I would tell them the story, that wasn't the story I was doing. And I realized I should be doing that story I'm telling everybody. And so I took those 100 pages and I flipped them over and I started drawing on the back of those 100 pages. So in one sense, I wasted months and months and months of work. In a better sense, I needed to go through those months and months of work to find the story I really wanted to tell. And so I just started page one and I went through it and I ended up with a story that was much, much better than the old one I was trying to tell. That was just like a slog, just like pulling teeth. I knew I was in trouble when I would sit down to work on it and I dreaded it.
Oh, yeah.
You just sit down and it's just like, oh crap, I don't know how to write this. I don't know how to draw this. I don't know how to tell this story, but I better just power through because I've put in a year and a half already. And I realized if I'm not having fun doing it, nobody's going to have fun reading it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a writer, and that's some advice that I got early on that it's one of those things that repeats in your head. If you're proofreading and you skip over paragraphs because you're like, oh, this doesn't.
Oh yeah.
That's
yeah.
That's a good sign
Yeah.
that might not be the right thing.
Yeah.
And to magnify that to a whole project, I mean, that's hard. You know, killing your children, killing your babies as they speak, as they say.
Yeah, it was, but I think it's necessary. But it's so hard in the moment to know. You know, how do you know?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe what you ought to do is just push on through, and it'll turn out great. You don't know. I think you sort of have to learn to trust yourself, and I've learned to kind of sort of trust my instincts of, you know, geez, I mean, I've been like paid to write things for a long time since I was 22 years old, 23 years old, and so I think I've got a pretty good instinct for what's going right, what's going wrong, and you know what I'll be able to figure out somehow if I keep working on it versus what I ought to just give up on. I think I got a good feel for that, but you got to make a lot of mistakes, I think, to get to that point.
So you've got a new paperback edition of A Fire Story that has 32 new pages of content. Is that right?
Yeah.
What is this new content?
Well, The Fire Story came out in spring of 2019, and you know, I started talking to my editor Charlie Kochman about, well, Abrams wanted to put out a paperback of it. They usually, if they put out a paperback at all, they put it out a year and a half after the hardcover comes out. And so I'm just talking to him about it. I said, well, you know, we've had some things happen to us since the fire, like we rebuilt and we've wrestled with insurance and we've gone through these things. And would you mind if I added 16 new pages about what that process was like?
And he's like, sure. People love to look at graphic novels about having to deal with insurance.
Well, Charlie was thrilled because then on the cover of A Fire Story, you can put new and improved, you know, with new stuff. He's got a hooked a little sales hook. He was thrilled. He said, yeah, it's 16 pages. And then, as you know, as a local person, that was about the time we had the Kincaid fire.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you had to evacuate, but I had to evacuate for the Kincaid fire. Yeah, of course you did.
Yeah, everybody did.
Everybody did. The whole county, 200,000 people evacuated. And the Kincaid fire did not follow the same course as the Tubbs fire that destroyed our houses, but it looked like it was going to come real close to mine. So we evacuated.
Winter there, because you're Yeah, you're nearby there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of the freeway from you. And so I sent my editor Charlie Kochman a note, and I said, yeah, I need 32 pages, but now I know how the story is going to end. So it ends with the Kincaid fire evacuation, and so he was happy to give me the 32 pages, and that's what it's about. It's our life after the first fire and up to the second. Because you've got to keep your horrific once in a century fire straight. It's the first or the second or the third or the fourth horrific fire of the century. We have
Right.
so many of them.
Yes. And we held the record for what, a good year.
For a year, yeah. And then we were the most destructive wildfire in California history for a year. And then the Camp Fire up in Chico came along, twice as many houses, twice as many people killed, twice as much property destroyed. And that's not a record that should be broken every year. That's terrible. I literally had the experience of talking to somebody like a remote acquaintance, and I said, well, I lost my house in the fire, and they said, which one?
Yeah.
It's like the fact that somebody has to ask the question of which one, because we've had like 8 of them. It's just horrible. It's horrible that that's even a question somebody would ask. But it's the fact of our lives these days.
Yeah, we persist. We rebuild.
I guess. I don't know how
Anyone
smart
asked you
that
the
makes
question
us.
why?
We rebuilt? Well, we didn't have quite as much information then as we do now, do we? I mean, at the time, the Tubbs fire was that once in 50-year event. And we thought, well, that won't happen again. And then we start rebuilding, and then there's another one. We rebuilt in the same spot, partly because we couldn't figure out anywhere else we'd rather live. We thought about, well, where would you want to go? Other cities, other parts of this city, other parts of the county. We really like this area, and we just wanted to stay here. We felt a lot of connection with our neighbors. We talked amongst our 8 or 10 closest neighbors, and all of them said, we'd like to come back. And the fact that they wanted to come back made us want to come back. It sort of gave us that little core community of support of we're all in this together. And that's pretty much how it turned out. It's been really great. We still kind of get together once in a while and we talk, and we're like old war buddies. We've been through a thing together that other people don't understand. Like you and me, you and I could have a conversation that most people couldn't have. And that's what it's like with these neighbors.
I mean, not everybody has those shared common experiences of, having to go to Target to buy underwear and all those things, man.
Well, I write in the book about going to Target and walking with your shopping cart the day after the fire and looking at other people's shopping carts and knowing they'd lost everything just by seeing what they were buying. Yeah. And you just make this connection. You don't even have to say any words. You just look at each other and you instantly know exactly what the other one's going through, because you look in their cart and you see socks and a pallet of bottled water and a long sleeve shirt and a short sleeve shirt, because who knows what the weather's going to be like tomorrow. Yeah. And yeah.
What did you evacuate with? What did you have?
Well, we had about 15 minutes to pack up, so we were much luckier than a lot of people. Luckier than you, I think, if I recall right. We had time, so we packed a suitcase with clothes. It's funny. One thing I noticed after the fires, and I didn't put this in the book, but it was an observation I had, that almost everybody I talked to planned to be evacuated for 2 days. Not 1 day, not 3 days, not 4 or 5. Everybody packed clothes as if they were going to be out of their house for 2 days. 2 pairs of underwear, 2 pairs of socks. That's exactly what we did. I don't know why that is. Somehow, like, 1 day is too short, but more than that, you don't want to think about, something like that. So we packed clothes for a couple of days. We did have a chance to load up some family photos, wedding albums, baby pictures, some. We forgot an awful lot that every day, hardly a week still goes by 3 years after the fire that we don't just look at each other and just say, oh, we forgot, we didn't grab, or it's simple, stupid things like, do we have a colander? We used to have a colander. Do we have a colander? I don't
Yeah,
know.
somebody just asked me the other day, "Hey, do you have a mandolin?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, no." Oh, wait, that was my last
No,
life.
no, don't have a mandolin.
Last
No.
kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, wait, my wife and I made, grilled cheese sandwiches, and I went looking for this square griddle pan we have that sits on the top of the stove. I haven't had that in 3 years. No, it
oh,
melted. It
man.
melted 3 years ago,
Oh,
So
yeah,
it's these little brain farts. But so we got some things. We saved the dog and cat, which we feel very fortunate about. We had neighbors who lost their dogs and cats and
right.
pets in the fire, but we saved a dog and a cat. And like I say, just some baby pictures and some essentials, but not enough. Not enough.
Exactly. How do you feel about, when people tell you it's just stuff?
You know how I feel about that.
But our listeners probably don't know that.
I think,
Everybody says, like, they're trying to make you feel better, right? They come up to you and they're, "Well,
yeah,
it's just stuff. It's all replaceable." And
yeah,
you're like,
and
"Ugh."
you got away with your life. And I feel very fortunate. I know people who were injured by fire, and 44 people died in our fires, and many have died in others. So we're better off than those folks, absolutely. But I often answer that question by telling people that when my wife was pregnant, we went to the obstetrician for an ultrasound, and they lubed her up, and they ran the ultrasound over her belly, and the ultrasound technician says, "I see two heads. You're having twins." And they took a Polaroid of that screenshot of the two heads in my wife's uterus. And I had that. We had kept that little Polaroid on the refrigerator for years. And then when it started to kind of, get a little fragile, we put it in a book. And that book burned up in the fire. I will never see that Polaroid again. So yeah, it's just stuff. It was a Polaroid picture that monetarily was worth 47 cents or whatever it costs to make a Polaroid picture. But it was the story of our lives. It was our connection. It was our roots. I say in the Fire Story book that I was uprooted. I became rootless because all that was gone, all those connections, all those things from your grandparents, your great-grandparents. I had 2 pictures of my great-grandparents that now exist only in my memory. I don't have any photos of them. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, it's now some of it's just stuff like we lost a car in the fire that melted in the garage. I haven't given 2 seconds of thought to that car.
Mhm.
And cars are worth thousands of dollars, but I haven't given a second's thought about that car. I don't care about that car. What I care about is the 47-cent Polaroid that I'll never see again.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, on
This is a
that
real
note,
upper. Yeah. Real good job there, Melissa.
yep, that's me. I mean, so far, every episode of this show has been super cheery.
Maybe you should rename the podcast.
The deep dark corners of your worst nightmares.
Instead of Misfits and Moguls, it'd be, I don't know, Downers and no, I don't know.
Oh gosh. All right. Well, let's see. I want to open it up to questions and comments from the audience. If anybody's watching, I see that we do have some people watching. So if you want to say anything or have a question for Brian, go ahead and leave a comment. Brian, what's next for you? I want to know do you know like what your next big project is going to be? Or
I do, and
hit?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you waiting for the meteor to hit?
I'm getting this reputation as the guy who makes comics about horrible things, and I'm trying to fight that as all I can. But yeah, well, the paperback version of A Fire Story with the 32 new pages of content is coming out this spring. So early April, I think, is the current schedule. And so that's a big deal. It's hard to do things like book tours in the Zoom world, but I'll do what I can to promote that and get out to sign books for folks. And then I've got, with luck, I'm scheduled to have another book out from Abrams in the fall, and I'm not going to tell you what it is because we haven't announced it. But my work on that is basically done, and it's not about anything horrible. So So hopefully that'll work. Hopefully
I
that'll
love
work.
it. I'm so excited. It's just, you find that common thing that draws you into a work or a project or a piece or something and introduces you to an artist, and all of a sudden you want to know everything about that artist. So you are that
Uh,
artist. And let's see, we have a question
you
from
know,
Ryan here.
let me
Go
just
ahead.
say, I haven't been very smart about my career. Because there are some folks who are very smart about their careers. My friend Raina Telgemeier does graphic novels, and some of them are about her, and some of them are fictional, non-fictional, but they all kind of look the same and kind of feel the same, and they're all sort of about middle school kids going through life. And so when you buy a Raina Telgemeier book, you know what you're getting. If you buy a Brian Fee's book, it could be anything. It could be like, oh well, his mom has cancer, his house burned down, or he's flying off to the moon with Buck Rogers, or I can only do things that I want to do and kind of let the chips fall where they may. But if I'd been smarter about my career, um, I might be that successful millionaire you wanted to interview. So I saw Ryan's question.
Yeah, let's get to Ryan's question. So, what is a quote that gets you through, or a mantra?
Big picture. I love this too shall pass, which is ancient. It's what they say, that somebody was always behind Caesar, whispering that in his ear. This too shall pass. It works for bad things. It works for good things. If you're going through good things, it reminds you not to get too cocky. If you're going through bad things, it gives you a little hope. I actually, because I knew we were talking about the freelancing life, I wrote down a Mark Twain quote I wanted to use, which
Cool.
I've always loved. And Mark Twain was often asked by young writers how to become successful writers. And Mark Twain said this: write without pay until someone offers you pay. If nobody offers within 3 years, the candidate may look upon this as a sign that sawing wood is what he was intended for.
Well, there you go.
I think
Failed saw some wood.
I think that's a secret to a freelancer's life. I mean, we kind of started talking about this, but at the start of a freelancing career, you're gonna take on little jobs. You're gonna do things nobody else wants to do, and probably aren't gonna pay very well. But you take those 5 crappy things you did that maybe got published on a website, and those become your clips. That's your body of work. That's your portfolio. You show that to somebody, you get a better job, you get a better gig, and then you put together 2 or 3 of those better gigs, and now that's your new portfolio. Always have a portfolio or samples or a website or something where you show like the 5 best things you've done, and you have to keep updating that. You don't want to show them the 5 crappy things you did 5 years ago. So that's important. I think is that's how I think. Unless you're just a meteor who shoots full blown from the brow of Zeus, I think that's how you build a career. Is you just start doing little crappy things that pay bad, and you turn them into bigger, less crappy things that pay better. And then if you're lucky, you catch the breaks and people like you and you get a reputation, maybe you got a career.
Yeah, you got to put in the work.
Yeah.
So here's a new question from somebody that you may or may not know.
Yeah.
Robin Feed asks, what advice would you give creators wanting to get into the graphic novel industry today? Is posting online still a good way to try and get your name out there?
Well, first of all, Robin, you should talk to your dad. Because I didn't know you wanted to get into the graphic novel. No, I'm kidding you. I think you're trying to help us out here. I appreciate it.
Okay.
No, actually, Robin's an excellent artist. She's done some award-winning comics herself. But yes, online is the way to go. Online is a great way to go, because believe it or not, and a lot of freelancers and people starting out don't believe this, publishers and people who put out content are dying for new, good content. They're dying for it. They're hungry for it. They're thirsty for it. They're looking for it. They're looking online for it. And if you can be that person, they will come to you. They will be the path to your door. And I know you don't believe that, because you've been out there working and sweating and trying to get your work out to anybody you can. And Robin says, legitimately asking for friends. Haha. And I believe that. Thank you, Robin. But online is wonderful. And online is not a resource I had available to me, but it worked for Mom's Cancer. It got me a book contract for a fire story. You can't beat on
Put it out there, right? Put it out into the universe.
Yeah, put it out in the universe any way you can. Yeah.
Mhm.
Any way you can, just do the work. And that's the important thing. Put your butt in the seat and do the work. So many people, I meet people who tell me, well, I'm an artist. Well, show me your stuff. Well, I don't have anything to show that. I haven't drawn anything. I'm a writer. Well, show me your clips. Well, I haven't actually written anything. Well, then you're not a writer. You're not an artist. If you put your butt in the seat and write something or draw something or do something, if you're a musician, if you compose something, you're already ahead of like 90% of the people who call themselves those things. You know, you're already ahead of the game, just doing it. And then the second part of that is get it out in the world any way you can. You got to show it to people who aren't your mom and dad or your brothers and sisters or boyfriends or girlfriends, because they're going to lie to you. They're just going to flat up lie to you because they love you, and you're not going to get any good feedback. The best feedback you can get on your work is if someone's willing to pay you money for it.
Yeah.
That's the feedback. That's what matters. And it sounds kind of crass and commercial, but that's a fact. If somebody likes your stuff enough to give you money for it, you're on the right path. Like Mark Twain said, otherwise Saul would.
A nice little wink there at the end. All right, Brian, thank you so much for hanging out with me for the last hour and telling your story.
Done already?
I know, right? It just kind of flew by.
Oh man. Okay.
Any final thoughts?
It's funny. I'm looking over my list. I think we hit most of them. I would just say, I mentioned, kind of doing little jobs nobody else wants for not very much pay. And there's this whole idea of, well, everybody deserves to get paid. They say artists get last a lot. Well, can you just draw this thing for me? It'll be good for exposure. It'll give you exposure, right?
Mhm.
And the comeback is, well, you can die of exposure. And exposure doesn't pay the rent or put food on the table. And I agree with that and understand that and sympathize, but I still think when you're starting out as a freelancer, you might just have to do some of that stuff to get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
You might have to do those 2 or 3 things. You might have to write the freaking PTA newsletter if you're a good writer. Actually, that's how Laura Ingalls Wilder started. She just wrote a little newsletter for her local newspaper for free, I think.
Huh.
But you might just have to do something like that. And I don't think there's any shame in it, as long as you as long as it's for you and not for them, as long as it's a strategy, as long as you're strategic about it and say, this is the time I'm putting in to get to the place I need to be, then I think you're okay. If you end up spinning your wheels and doing that for too long, then you're wasting your time and your money and your effort, and you're not getting paid appropriately. But you might just have to put up with some stuff and go through some lean times to build up that portfolio, to build up the body of work, to build up the respect. I think that's a necessary part of the freelance life sometimes.
It probably helps to know exactly where you're going too. Otherwise, you can kind of get lost in that murky job to job mode.
Yeah, with flexibility, because a lot of times you'll see that left turn and you won't take it, and that's the turn you should have taken,
right?
Because it's not on what you think you ought to be doing. I know a lot of people who pound against that brick wall, and then they just take a little step to the left, and everything opens up for them just because they do it for like that. And I think that's you got to be open to those possibilities.
Great, love it. If people want to find more information about you and your work, they can go to Brian Fies, BrianFies.blogspot.com. And what else is there? Let's see. How do they get a hold of copies of your books?
I always tell people to order them from your heroic local independent bookseller. You might be able to walk in and find them, although Mom's Cancer is an older book, so it's hard to find. But A Fire Story might still be out there, but they can order them for you. Or all my books are on Amazon. That's last resort, though. Try to support your local heroic independent bookseller.
Oh, yeah. I know the local bookstores around Sonoma County have been a huge support of yours and have massive displays up periodically as well. So
they have. I really appreciate it. Copperfield's has been it's a local chain that's been just terrific to me. And actually, the local Barnes and Noble in downtown Santa Rosa has had A Fire Story in their front window ever since it came out. And I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for taking the time to hang out with us. And you didn't need your safe word today, so that was good.
Well, you didn't. Yeah. Next time, dig a little deeper, Melissa.
Yeah, I
Gee,
gotta get better. I gotta get better.
you gotta make me cry.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. See you guys.
Thank you.